Right. Well, I haven't had this conversation in a long time, so just thought talk about some of the numbers that I find in the Bible and their significance and their meaning. I was a fundamentalist Baptist. Went to Hiles Anderson College, a fundamentalist Baptist college, street preaching type, strong evangelist, and one of the ones who brought a very large number of people into our church and ministry. Won a spring break or spring contest one time. Brought 89 visitors to church and won a contest to go to the Philippines. So I wasn't apt or quick to give up what I believe. Now, I'd already given up fundamentalism back in 2012, but of course believed still that there was no reason to give up the greater understanding of the Bible. So being an introverted, logical type thinker, I tend to have to persuade myself, and a self thinker for the most part. And I was never popular, never made friends at Hiles Anderson College, so I never was part of the group think. And part of the reason no one liked me up there and why it took me so long to go through college is because I refused to swear loyalty to Hiles or those sort of people. And so I was never part of a crowd. Most everything I did was pretty much on my own for the most part. So I didn't make friends, but being that sort of a logical type thinker, I've always wanted to think for myself. But because of the poor education at Hiles Anderson College, I had to work hard after I got out. I was working two, three jobs to just barely make ends meet. So it didn't give me much time to really study and prove other things to myself and to come to a greater knowledge and understanding. I finally, um, we were kind of forced out of fundamentalism because we just couldn't take it anymore, you know. But I finally had the opportunity when I finally relented out of fundamentalism, let my wife start working and that sort of thing. I started opening up that I had enough time to really study, and I began to research for a book, which is called Why is the Moon a Cube now, that's out on Amazon. Careful about buying it, honestly, because if you look at some of our last, especially yesterday's video, you'll see why Amazon is screwing over our video. Has nothing to do, or has is screwing over my book because it has nothing to do with the information about numbers or the Bible. They don't generally care about that. That's a whole other story. But you can go back and look and see what they're doing. But they're printing the book backwards and with different fonts, and uh, it's a nightmare dealing with government servants who are running Amazon, Facebook, and even YouTube and that sort of thing. Um, so anyway, but while I was studying that material, um, I began to recognize that the people who wrote, especially the New Testament, and then later as I learned the Old Testament, they were doing the same thing. The more I dive, I find that there's a great deal of knowledge that goes into writing the Bible. This wasn't done by uneducated or stupid people. It wasn't done by fishermen. It wasn't done by disciples. This was done by an educated, very intelligent people that had to have learned something. Now, understand that back in those days, 95, maybe 99% of the populations were illiterate. So when you see in the Bible things that, like I'm about to talk about, it it proves to a logical thinker that there's no possibility other than that uneducated people and fishermen could not possibly have known this information. It's something that would only be passed down in something like a mystery school, of which there were many. Because if you went to school per se back then, you paid for it, you studied hard, and and it was difficult to get in to a mystery school back then. You either had to have a lot of money, but you had to have a lot of money because you had to be able to support yourself. So you already had to have been somewhat smart to begin with, and you also somehow either had to read or go to one that would teach you to read from the very beginning. In these mystery schools, you learn all sorts of things about astrology and astronomy and geometry, and that's where Pythagoreanism comes from. But here's some of the things that I began to learn in the Bible are are just absolutely mind numbing. Now, I discovered, of course, that in the Old Testament, Jesus is Yeshua, right? Or Joshua, if you will. And that gets translated in Greek to Jesus, but is that really a fair translation from Joshua, which ends in a vowel sound, to the harsh sounding Jesus, in Greek? How did that happen? Well, sure, it sounds a little bit like Jesus, which I don't think is coincidence either. But what I discovered was when somebody gave me a picture out of a book, and I haven't bought the book yet because it's like, I forget the title of it, but it's something like $80 when I looked it up, even on eBay. So one of these days I'll buy the whole book. But just on that one page, it said the value of the name of Lord Jesus Christ in Greek is 3168. And I said, well, what the heck is that talking about? But it didn't say how, and it didn't say why. So I began studying more, and I started looking at how Irenaeus, the one of the early church fathers around 150, was using gematria, or the value of the Greek letters, because because numerals had not yet been invented. Okay, remember that numbers like 1, 2, 3, and 4, those weren't invented until I think the 4th or 5th century. So before that, every letter was a number. So literally everything that you wrote had a numerical value. That includes the name Lord Jesus Christ. And what happened was that this name could not have just been a natural name, because the value of its name is so unique and special that it explains how Yeshua became Jesus, because it had to equal a specific numerical value. Now, remember that Pythagorean geometry, this is about geometry. These people, thousands of years ago, they didn't think the world was flat. Okay, they thought the world was round, and not only did they think it was round, they had measured it. Now, before you give me the obvious question that a lot of people say, or refutation that, oh, they weren't using miles and feet and inches back then, I want to explain to you first that the megalithic yard is not much smaller than the current yard. So these numbers and mathematical numbers somehow was known. And also, it's not the exact diameter, it's what they discovered was the diameter. And they went with it close enough so that they could come up with a mathematical model to put into their language and studies. And you'll see what I mean by that here in a minute. The number that they had for the diameter of the Earth was 7,920. That's in today's miles. Now, they may have called it something different, I don't know. So, these numbers could have been translated into what we're doing modern, but it doesn't make any difference because they would have had some representation of what I'm calling it now. So 7920, and when you multiply that by 4, you get the diameter of the Earth, and then you create a box around the Earth. Kind of look at my head, like you pretend it's a circle, right? And if you drew a perfect square around the Earth, okay, the diameter of the Earth times 4, you get the number 31,680. So that's the value of Lord Jesus Christ in Greek, just with an extra 0 on the end. And that's by no means a coincidence. Then you look into it a little further, and you find things like, 3168, and you find that the divisors of 3168 added together sum to 6,616. Oh, that's interesting. And then you find things like this. You find why they thought 3168 was the number to choose for Lord Jesus Christ is because you could add other numbers in sequence and come to that equation. For example, if you add the numbers 18 through 81, 18 plus 19 plus 20, and you just sit there and do that on a calculator until you get all the way to 81, it equals 3168. And this is interesting. And this came from Jonathan Bowe, by the way, who also gave me the picture of that first book. He discovered this what I'm saying right now, that 9, 11, 19, 9 times 11 times 19, like 911 and 1119, equals 1881. Then you add 18 through 81, and it's 3168. Now, some people would say, well, does that mean you're trying to say that the Bible's telling the future and it's magical and supernatural and that sort of thing? And not at all. And I think that was the misunderstanding that Derek from Myth Vision and Apostate Prophet were inferring, that somehow I was trying to say that that there's a magic fortune telling aspect to this. And I suppose there's probably people that consider themselves numerologists or whatever who probably think like that, and maybe even the Greeks thought like that at some point. I don't know for sure. But all I know is that they knew real numbers too, and they knew real geometry. This is why we still have, Pythagorean geometry in some aspects taught in schools today. These were brilliant people, and it's well known that they knew the size of the Earth, that the Earth was round at least 500 years BC, and I would say it was way before that, because I think the pyramids were built by the radius. The height is the radius of the Earth and the Moon together, and so forth. So, adding these things together, this is knowledge that's thousands and thousands of years old, and it's been passed down and pointed to through mystery schools. And I don't think Pythagorean mystery schools discovered any of it. I think they received it, but they really liked it. They probably built on it, and they constructed words like Lord Jesus Christ. It's well known that the Chi-Rho, or the symbol XR, in which Christ is first began, was a good luck charm that was on buildings for hundreds of years BC. All over Greece, you find the Chi-Rho as a symbol on buildings. So now you see it on churches today. You'll see a Chi-Rho, and it's amazing how long that symbol has become. So they started to manufacture the name Lord Jesus Christ by this mathematical knowledge. It's not magical, it's not fortune telling. And when I say something like 9/11 is in the Bible, what really happened is that the people who did 9/11, if you watch our videos with Hugh Squire, the 9/11 was constructed to hide his trademarks and his tax receipts and licenses and things when they stole his trademark and his licenses. And that's what led to 9/11. And the people that did that are from America, and they're and they know this military coding, and they understand this. The military uses this sort of coding and crap. It doesn't mean I believe it or I think it's special, but I think they looked back in the Bible and they said, oh, the Tower of Babel's in chapter 11, Genesis chapter 11, verse 19. 119. And then they looked in Revelation and they saw, oh, the angel of the bottomless pit, the god of destruction, if you will. Revelation 9:11, Apollyon. Okay, let's combine 9:11 there. Oh, and it just so happens the biggest chapter in the Bible is Psalm 119. So we got the beginning and the middle and the end. This is a big, long, important thing to us. We're going to design 9/11 by that number. And they had designed it all the way back in his birthday when they took Hugh's baby pictures on 9/11, which he shows, okay? Which I have the pictures and show, and they were taken by George Towers, like George Bush destroyed the Twin Towers, right? And this video wasn't specifically meant to be about Hugh per se, but it's hard to get away from it when you talk about 9/11, because they destroyed the towers to hide the evidence of what they stole from him. And 28,000 contracts that were worth trillions of dollars. Just one song worth $88 million, which he shows you the Send in the Clowns on that Sondheim wrote. He just died recently, and just that one song's worth $88 million. And he had contracts for 28,000 songs, with ASCAP and so forth. And it's not just the songs that were hidden underneath there too. It's the value of his trademark that was stolen and used around the world in lawyers' bars, and the California lawyers' bar. We have the website clipping of where they stole that and used that, where they made it the names of actual bars around the world, including the Bottom Line Bar in New York, where a lot of musicians and rock musicians got their start and so forth. So if you're gonna cover up something like that, you're gonna use some coded military understanding. It's not that the Bible is being prophetic. It's not that it's supernatural. It's that people now are looking back and designing what they're doing according to knowledge that they glean from the Bible, and certain numbers. But there's so many numbers in the Bible like this that, as a logical thinker, it forced me to reconsider the notion of everything we've been taught, not just as I wasn't a fundamentalist originally, I was just a regular Baptist originally. But regular Baptist or fundamentalist teaching, or just what the Bible says in general, has to be reconsidered and thought by a logical mind when you understand. And I couldn't just give up the Bible simply. I had to have a logical reason that understood, that made it clear that this was not written by shepherds and by fishermen and so forth. These numbers were written by very intelligent people. They constructed the Bible like this all through. So I take right at the very beginning, right there in when we construct the name of God, Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God. And what they're really saying in Genesis, when they start out with his name, is the first letter is Yod. So when you got to think like an ancient scribe for a second. If you put a pen to paper, a Yod is the smallest point. That's why you have in Star Wars, you have Yoda, and he's just a little guy. I mean, George Lucas, I'm guessing, is probably Jewish. If not him, then probably, some of the writers and producers probably are. Then, so he knows this, right? So Yod is the smallest letter. So when you put pen to paper, you've separated light from darkness. That's the first point of the name of God. And that's why in the beginning, God made light and separated the light from the darkness. And that was the first day. He put the Yod to the paper. Okay, that's the very first point. Now I'll go to the next letter of the name of the Tetragrammaton, the He. The He looks like a little H, and it has one little space there where the Yod goes, okay? So you put the Yod there, and then you draw the He around it. Oh, well, we're missing a little bit. So we have a symbol that kind of looks like pi, like this, and that's important too. We'll get the pi in a little bit too. And then, wait, but there's nothing down here. So you go Yod, the next letter is He, the third letter is Vav. Oh, well, Vav is a straight line. Oh, it fills in that little gap, doesn't it? So you have the Yod point, the He, and the Vav. Oh, so now you have a square, a perfect square. Isn't that interesting? But there's one more letter, the next He. Yod, He, Vav, He. And then it makes another one. And just think of it as a three-dimensional side as you go back to make the square into a cube. Now, when you continue with the Yod, He, Vav, He, and you write it vertically instead of, from right to left like Hebrew, let's put the Yod on top. Looks like a little head. Then you put the He underneath that. It looks like little arms. Then you have a Vav. It looks like his belly. And another He underneath that, and it looks like his feet. So you have a little man, okay, and this is literally what it says in the Bible. You are made in the image of God. And that's what it's talking about, because the Yod, He, Vav, He, when you write it vertically, produces a man. Okay, so now this cube idea is very, very important throughout the Bible. This is why you have, in Islam, you have the Kaaba, which every Muslim is supposed to go once in his lifetime, and he's supposed to go around the Kaaba. And the symbol of the Kaaba, or of Islam, is not only the Kaaba, but it's also the crescent moon. All right. Well, in my book, Why is the Moon a Cube? I'm asking and exploring the question, well, why are these symbols so important, and that the cube and the moon seem to have similar numbers attached to them? And then they became the symbol of Islam. And Kabbalah to the Jews, sounds like Kaaba, Kabbalah. Oh, that's the cube. And then you ever notice the rabbis, some of them wear the little cube on their, little prayer cube. That's not a coincidence. Just like the Kaaba is a black cube, and every Muslim's supposed to go there at least once in his lifetime. So here's your Kaaba and your Kabbalah, and it's cubes. Why all the obsession with cubes? And then I add the degrees in a cube, and it's a total of 2,160 degrees total in a three-dimensional cube. And then I see that the moon is the diameter, the ancient value of the moon is 2,160. Now, you might notice that in Jainism and all through temples, from the Temple of the Moon in Mexico City, I believe, all the way to Angkor Wat in Asia. You have the 216 being built into symbols or temples. So temples have that number 216, and they'll be 216 feet long or whatever. And these are just divisions of the megalithic yard. I know they were using something equivalent to a megalithic yard, which is just shy of our yard today. So these numbers didn't come from England like people think. The numbers that we use in the United States are much, much older, and probably tied into this, well, no doubt are tied into these mystery Pythagorean geometry somehow. And maybe that's why, the United States chose to keep the system that we have. There are a lot of Freemasons and that sort of thing. And this is not saying that the Freemasons are Illuminati or any kind of garbage like that. I don't believe that. But they did have a role in starting the United States, and that's probably why we didn't go to the metric system. Now I'm guessing on that, but when you see that the Washington Memorial was 5,550 inches, which is 666 feet, and that sort of thing, you kind of figure, yeah, maybe they know some of that. So anyway, so the moon symbolism and the cube symbolism are very similar. This is why in Revelation, the New Jerusalem. Now, if you're not Christian or you don't have the Bible background, you may not know that the New Jerusalem is the place where Christians actually are going to live forever. It's not really in heaven. They say you go to heaven or hell, but no. If you read Revelation, and this is standard Orthodox doctrine, that Christians will live in the New Jerusalem on the new earth and the New Jerusalem comes down from heaven. When the New Jerusalem is measured, you see that it comes out to be a cube, 12,000 furlongs by 12,000 furlongs. 12 times 12 is 144. There were 144,000 casing stones on the Great Pyramid, for example. Well, anyway, so you could also say it's possibly a pyramid because it just gives the two dimensions, 12,000 by 12,000. So, that would also work for a pyramid. So, we don't know. But I'm going to assume it's a cube, and this is why. That verse was written in Revelation 21, verse 16. Oh, 2116. So it has an extra one in it, but it's the 216. So at least the King James translators understood the math that the Pythagoreans were trying to put into that understanding, and when they versed out the book of Revelation, they put it in Revelation 21:16 to match the number of degrees in a cube. It's really, really smart. No, I'm not saying that the original Greek were delineated into chapters and verses. That's or not delineated. They were not parsed out into chapters and verses. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the translators into English understood what was going on, and they did it like that. Even the English spelling of Lord Jesus Christ was also done to create some mathematical properties. It doesn't equal exactly the same as 3168 because they couldn't figure that out, but they did make it into where it reduces to 495. And Interstate 495 is the interstate that goes around Washington, D.C. So, 7 times 7 is 49. You forgive 490 times, Jesus said. So they created it that way in English, the best they could to reflect a mathematical knowledge. So, and even Kurios Jesus Christos, changing it to Lord. Well, why did they change it from something, instead of transliterating it to curious or something like that? Why did they change it to Lord? Well, because they were trying to create a mathematical puzzle in English, just like the ancient Pythagorean authors of the New Testament did to Lord Jesus Christ when they took it from Hebrew and Joshua became Jesus. Okay, so the people that now, if you've ever gone and looked at a Masonic Bible, there was this guy at our church that always brings his Masonic Bible, and when he stepped out, I looked in the back of his Bible, and it says to interpret the entire Bible according to the Egyptian mystery. So that this is not just stuff that, even though I discovered it on my own, a lot of it, and John Basey gave me some of this stuff too. But a lot of this information has been well known and understood. And it's intuitive because the people who wrote it made it such that anyone with a mind who wants to just scrap what other people are telling him every day and look at things for himself can easily see what the authors intended to write. So if you're smart enough to just look at it yourself and not worry about what your pastor taught you, or what your parents taught you, or what your church taught you, and all that, you clear all that away and just look at it, you'll come to the same conclusions as the people who wrote it. And that's the beauty of all of it, because math is not something you can really dispute. I mean, 2 plus 2 is always 4. The angles of a cube for all of eternity are always going to be 2,160 degrees. So there's no way you can dispute this. So using the same Greek gematria that Irenaeus used to try to figure out who the Antichrist was back in 150, using just the basic Greek letters and their well-known values that were established at the time, you can calculate for yourself that Lord Jesus Christ is 3168. And 1881, 18 through 81, well, there was a guy talking about that on Apostate Prophet's channel one day. He came up and talked about how the lines on your hand mean 1881, so you're marked by God or something. I don't understand what he talks. I think he said the lines look like Arab numerals or something. I don't know. But anyway, the whole reason he said that number 1881, I recognized that immediately. I knew that 18 through 81 added together is 3168. Well, that's because back in the 6th century or whatever, whenever they came up with that, that number must have been floating around. And I don't think I agreed with the Apostate Prophet that these numbers. I don't think the average Arabs at the time knew any of that. But apparently, remember that Muhammad married a Nestorian, which is a Gnostic sect in a Gnostic church, a Gnostic Nestorian church. So one of his 16 wives, I forgot her name. It's been too long. But one of his 16 wives, he married in a Nestorian church, which is a Gnostic sect. So would he have learned some of that passed down from that region? Yeah, most likely that's where I think he got that. Now, did the other Muslims understand that around him? No, but I bet there were a few. There were some scholars and people that did pass it down. Now, I think they said that the splitting of the moon, if I understood this caller on the program correctly, he said that the splitting of the moon was talked about in 1220. And I thought, well, that's an interesting number. Then I add 12 through 20 together. Oh, it's 144. Okay. Like the number of the redeemed in Revelation. So that was a very interesting caller. But, I tried to put it in the comments. But you face a dilemma when you know this sort of knowledge, and you know that the people around you have never encountered it before. So you try to explain it to them. To them, it just sounds crazy. Then they start putting their own inferences of what they think the numbers, what I'm trying to say, like, oh, you're talking about fortune telling. No, I don't believe that these are magical fortune telling numbers or anything like that. I just think that the people that originally designed our language, they didn't have numbers yet, so the letters were the numbers, so every name had a value, and they used those names to tie it into their geometric concepts. It's real simple. And now today, thousands of years later, sometimes people even look at those numbers and design things. Even you see some of this stuff in the news and stuff today where they still design things by some of these numbers and things. But apparently the numbers were well known enough that they made it to Angkor Wat in Asia. They made it to the temple, the sun, and the moon in Mexico. And even in the earth mounds, which are in my book, Why is the Moon a Cube? They're right there in the mounds, even up here in North America. Like the 3 mounds that I wrote about were 666 feet above sea level, not by coincidence. And they put a 36 foot circle around it, 36 feet away from the base of the mound. Well, that's because 36 is the triangular of 666. And it's obvious that these people knew that, and they knew concepts like squaring the circle. That's why up in Newark, Ohio, you have mounds that show examples of squaring the circle and so forth. So these numbers were well known in the ancient world for a very long time. They appear to all of them originate, in my opinion, in India. Now, India, even today, is the center of Jainism, and Jainism loves that number 108. They just unveiled a statue a few years ago that was 108 feet tall, and they talk about that number 108 all the time. Well, what is 108? Well, if you take the radius of the moon, 2,160, and you divide it by 2, it's 1,080. So it's just 108, minus a 0. Real simple. So now let's talk about pi for a little bit. So they love that number 108, and you see the temple. Just to go back to 2160 and 108 is in all these temples and earthworks constructions all over the world today. Now, let's talk about pi for a minute. Pi is all through the Bible, and people don't see it right away. Okay, and usually it's talking about Jesus. All right. Does anybody know where the first prophecy that Jesus was going to come or a Messiah was going to come is located in the Bible? That would be in Genesis chapter 3, verse 14. Okay. Chapter 4 or verse 14 and verse 15 are one sentence. It's 2 verses, 1 sentence. Okay. So 3:14 is pi, isn't it? And in verse 15 it says that well, hello, how you doing? Rebecca, right? Yeah, same as my wife. No, I'm doing great, Rebecca. Doing great. So in Genesis 3:14, you have the first prophecy of Jesus coming. And in verse 15, it says that the serpent shall crush the head of the seed of the woman, who shall bruise the heel of the coming Messiah, right? And then you start thinking, oh, these ancient Greeks and ancient Romans, they really like that number 315, don't they? Because does anybody know when Julius Caesar was killed? Oh, on March 3, third month, 15, right? 315. That's how it got translated down to today, right? I understand they were using a different calendar and all that, but somebody knew that and incorporated it into our calendar today. So you had death on 3:15. Oh, so the first prophecy of Jesus' death was in Genesis 3:15, one verse after pi 3:14, right? Which is the same sentence. 3:14 and 15 are one sentence. So now pi that's the prophecy, but then you go to the very last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and you go to chapter 4 and verse 2. And this is very interesting because it says the capital S-U-N, so that they capitalize it because it's a proper noun in this instance. The S-U-N of righteousness. And I understand today, the Son, you can capitalize it as a proper noun, but in Old English, you didn't. And all through the Bible, the Son is not capitalized except in this verse. Okay. So in Malachi 4:2, you have the Son of righteousness shall come with healing in his wings. Capital S-U-N. So the last chapter of the Old Testament is telling you in chapter 4, verse 2, 42. Remember that number for a second. That Jesus is going to come and that he is the Son, S-U-N. The prophet himself, the minor prophet, believed that Jesus, the S-O-N, is really the S-U-N, just like the Masons say in their Bible to interpret the Bible by the Egyptian mysteries. Now, what is the interesting thing about 4:2? The number 42, if you've ever watched The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, remember that movies are made by, many of them are made by Jewish people. And I'm not putting Jews down. That's not what I'm doing here. What I'm trying to tell you is that they know the significance of these numbers, and so they incorporate them into their movies. So number 42 is 3 times 14. So pi, numbers within pi, 3 times 14 is 42. Real simple, okay? The math that I do is just simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division that everybody from a third grade education on can do. So I'll never get into any advanced calculations. I can't do those anyway. I was not good in algebra in high school or anything like that. And you don't have to be, because we're talking about ancient math. They did geometry. They did addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay, that's all they did. And maybe they did a little bit more, but that's as far as we need to go to understand things like this. So back to 4-2. So you had the Hitchhiker's Guide, and the biggest number in the universe, the secret number, that was 42, right? And that's because it's 3 times 14 is 42. Now, so we had Genesis 3:14, we had Malachi 4:2, and then you jump straight over to the first book of the New Testament. And what do you see? You see the lineage of Jesus in Matthew coming from 3 groups of 14 generations of his ancestors. There's 14 generations from Adam to Abraham. There's 14 generations from Abraham to David, and 14 generations from David to Jesus. So 3 times 14. Now, this is very interesting. Now, I told you a minute ago that the Freemasons will tell you to interpret the Bible by the Egyptian mysteries. Well, let's think about that number 42 in Egyptian mysteries for a second. In Egypt, the Egyptians had to pass the 42 principles of Ma'at, that is spelled M-A-apostrophe-A-T, Ma'at or Mat. You had to pass the 42 principles of Ma'at so that when you stood at judgment, if you did good based on those 42 principles, and your heart was lighter than a feather, then you would go to heaven. Otherwise, you'd get eaten by a big crocodile. So I still think that's funny. But so anyway, so you had to pass the 42 principles of Ma'at. Isn't that interesting? 42. So then you go to Revelation, which is so full of these geometric numbers and Pythagorean geometry and isopsephies and puzzles and things. And what do you see in Revelation? You see that the Great Tribulation, remember there's 7 years of tribulation time, but the last 3.5 years are called the Great Tribulation. That's when Antichrist is supposed to come and defile the temple and all that sort of thing and start persecuting everyone. Well, then you have 3.5 years, which if you add up the number of months in 3.5 years, guess what? It's 42. So you have 42 trial months before the big great white throne judgment, don't you? And yeah, I know there's 1,000 years, but after that and so forth. But it's right near the last few chapters of the Bible for a reason. The Christians are going to be put through the 42 principles of Ma'at, so to speak, the Great Tribulation before they're judged. You understand? It's not an exact copy of the mysteries of Egypt. It's just based on it. So that's why the Freemasons tell you to interpret the Bible by the Egyptian mysteries, things like that. There are also other mathematical puzzles in the Bible that I've discovered, just looking through them for myself. One is phyllotaxis. For example, when you have a tree branch and another tree branch grows from that tree branch, it grows at a well-known and established average of 137 degrees. Now, I've looked around at other plants and I've noticed that not all plants do this, but it seems like all the trees around me seem to. Maybe not weeping willows, but I think most trees do pretty much abide by that. So 137 degrees is the angle of phyllotaxis, the angle in which trees bud new stems off of old trees. Now, back in Genesis, and let's see, is it chapter 11, verse 17? Time says together, and it's 119 again. Anyway, in that same chapter, the floods are going down, and Noah's about to release the dove. And the numbers, there's 4 numbers, I think it's 4 numbers given right before he does that. And you add them together and they equal 137. Well, I was adding the numbers in the Bible and I said, well, this is interesting. 137, well, I know what that is. And then the dove, I keep reading, and the dove comes back, and what does it have in its beak? An olive branch, a new branch. It's symbolism. It's saying new growth for the earth, you see. So, and there's phi throughout the Bible. You see, like the altar is It has a phi relationship when you multiply the numbers and then you multiply it by the inches in a cubit. And I strongly believe in the 18-inch cubit based on measurements within the cube and so forth. Um, what other numbers are in the Bible that I can think of? In Revelations, it talks about the floods too. Let's see, and about water, and it related to Genesis. I think it was 11:17. 11 times 17, I think, is 119, if I'm not mistaken. So you can say the numbers forward or backward, and they do. And it's amazing how throughout the Bible this matches up. And then we had our number 42 again. And if you remember the number of bears that ate the children when Elisha was insulted by the kids, and they called him a bald head. Oh, and they had 42 bears, didn't they? There's your 42 again. And isn't it interesting that in John, when the fish were captured, that they bothered to count the number of fish that they caught? I mean, who does that? You get a big net of fish. Jesus tells them, "No, you're not getting any fish on that side of the boat. Cast the net on the other side of the boat." So they bring in the fish, and they count them, and it's 153 fish. And you're like, well, 153? What? Why did they say? Why did they count 153? What's that all about? And then you realize, oh, the Greeks believed there were 153 constellations total, not the 12 of the zodiac, but altogether. And talking about the 12 of the zodiac, you have 12 apostles of the Lamb, right? And you had the 12 children of Israel, 12 times 12. And isn't that exactly? Does it not say that there's the gates in the New Jerusalem are named after the apostles or something to that effect? And then you measure, and it says, it's 12,000 furlongs by 12,000 furlongs. These are all signs of the zodiac. This is why the New Jerusalem comes down from heaven, because this is the symbol in heaven. So then you have symbols in the Bible, or you hear that heaven is in the parts of the north. I think it says in Job, right? The North Star. And that, why the north? What's that got to do with anything? Then you read that the devil takes 1/3 of the angels with him to hell to rebel against God, right? So 1/3 of the angels are taken. Then you realize that one of the closest constellations to the North Star is Draco. Draco, the dragon, the serpent. The serpent's called the dragon in the Bible. And you look out, and it because it's so close to the North Star, okay, and it circles the North Star. That's where the idea of Ouroboros comes from, the snake chasing its tail, okay? It's because Draco is close to the North Star. And then you realize that roughly, if you extrapolated that out to the horizon and you look down to the horizon from where, let's say this is the North Star and Draco, and you look down to the horizon on the Earth, you would realize that it's roughly 1/3 of the stars, 1/3 of the sky would be underneath the umbrella of Draco, like that. And you realize, you're talking about mythology. You're talking about astrology and astronomy, however you want to say it. And when you see so much of this in the Bible, you're forced logically to understand that the stories of the Bible were never meant to be taken literally as we were taught in church, and like I believed my entire life. And I didn't just give that up easily. Remember, I was a fundamentalist. Okay, I brought 89 people to church and won a trip to the Philippines at Hiles-Anderson College. Where they had First Baptist Church. I was a street preacher. I went up there and evangelized and really wore myself out up there for 9 years, or 7 of them, 2 years at another college. For 7 years of that stupid place, and I did it because I really believed it. Okay, I didn't want to just give this up. So when I lost fundamentalism, I had to have concrete reasons, to ever give up the Bible. I wasn't about to do that. I held on to the Bible for another 8 years after that, 9 years. All this stuff is just very recent in my life. So studying this stuff and learning it and seeing all this all this math, all this astrology, all this geometry, all this gematria in the Bible, and you realize this was not done by fishermen. This was not done by ignorant people. This was done by educated people that had to have learned under other educated people in mystery schools, for example, or perhaps they even learned from the government and they were creating propaganda stories for the government. That's a possibility as well. That definitely happens in today's news, where we see numbers in the news all the time that are being created to pass on other stories through military communication and even police communication through news stories that everybody else reads and they think it's about something else. And of course, I can provide just unbelievable numbers of this, and I do all the time on my Facebook page and in my group. Um, we outline these stories all the time and how there's always a hidden message behind, not always, but there's a lot of times a hidden message below the superficial message. And it was like that even in Bible times. So very possibly the Bible was propaganda from the government. But I think I lean more towards it being most likely a um, a result of mystery school authors, and maybe they were writing to create a character of Jesus for some reason, maybe to comfort the people after the fall of Jerusalem, to create a new identity and gather the people together as they were facing the diaspora and being spread throughout Europe. I don't know for sure. I don't know exactly why they did it. I don't claim to know everything. I don't claim to be a scholar. I just claim to be a person who can think for myself and who's not too afraid to look at things, throw everything down, and start over. Now, yeah, this really shook me to the core learning this, because it's not like I just wanted to give this up, okay? My kid asked me recently, he says, she said, now that your beliefs are changing, she said, does that mean you're not going to love me anymore? I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know, no, it doesn't mean that at all. And she says, well, I really want to believe in Jesus. Can I believe in Jesus? I said, of course you can, pumpkin. I said, but this is the only thing that I want you to learn. I said, never be afraid for the rest of your life to take everything you've learned and be willing to start over as you learn new things and understand, because you don't know at what point in your life something led you to be wrong about something. So you see that something's wrong and you start looking to try to figure out the answer. Go back and just be willing to go back as far as it takes, all the way down to the very foundation if you have to. And I know Jesus says he's the foundation and the chief cornerstone, right? Well, be willing to go down that far and see if even Jesus is who he said that he really is, or at least you know, is he really the chief cornerstone? We were talking about that number 137, and in the Freemason logo, they have the compass and they have the square, right? It's on every Masonic lodge in America, okay? Well, that angle of the compass is 47 degrees. The angle of the square is 90 degrees. Of course, a square measures a cube, like we were talking about. Why is the moon a cube, right? The New Jerusalem is a cube. Add 47 plus 90. It equals 137, the angle of Philo-Taxis. So I'll be writing, there's a lot more, but I'm not even looking at my notes. This is just all what I have in my head. There's so much more that my brain can't store that I have written down in my notes. And we're going to talk about Bible numbers in my third book. I still got a second book I'm working on. I've already got like 23 chapters, and I'm having to learn basically the whole history of America to write it. And it's a book that's going to be studied by historians for hundreds of years, because it literally chronicles the man whose trademarks were stolen that and led to 9/11. And it has to do with Kennedy and Hoffa, and they're all interconnected, and how they're interconnected. And it's an unbelievable history. I have to go back to the 1800s and Edgar Allan Poe and learn about the Fuller family, that it was this man's relatives, and how how Albert Pike was related to him. And this is partly why they use these numbers in military code. He's the guy that wrote Morals and Dogmas for the Freemasons. And the Freemasons aren't bad people by any stretch of the imagination. It's not a bad organization. There's good and bad people in it, of course, but those are the people that wrote your Constitution, that gave you the freedoms. Don't fear Freemasonry as a concept. There may be bad people in it doing it. You might get a branch of people that are doing something wrong, but don't fear it as an occult. It is occult. It's giving you hidden knowledge. But this is why they don't evangelize. Because what I found out is when I try to present this, like I did on Derek's channel a little bit ago, or it was Gnostic Informant, Derek Lambert and Apostate Prophet were on there, but they can't, because they haven't encountered it and really studied it out before. It comes across just as crazy. Well, the Freemasons know that too. This is why they don't evangelize. That's why they put their buildings on their lodges on the top of the hill. Like in our town, it's right there at the very top of the hill, in the highest part of town. So everybody can see it. So if you choose that you don't want to know what they have to say, well, that's up to you. Now, I'm not a Freemason, but I did go in there and I talked to them. What I discovered, there was only one guy in there that appeared to know as much or more than I did, possibly, and he wouldn't tell me anything because I wasn't a Freemason. But the others were clueless. I think the others go in there and they just, they're there to get prestige and maybe to be able to know the policeman, so if they get pulled over, they don't get a ticket or something. They raise a lot of money, and some of them just like to be with other people and that sort of thing, which is all good. I don't care why they're there. It's not a criticism. It's just in general, people don't want enlightenment for themselves. And I've discovered that if you go out and you tell people things that they generally don't, they're not that interested. Enlightenment doesn't, it's not forced on you like fundamentalism is. Real enlightenment and real knowledge, you have to go out and get it. This is why Jesus said, "Forbid not the little children to come unto me." But then he said, the disciples, unto you, to the 12. He said, unto the 12, unto you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God. So there's all the little children. You have to come, though. That's the secret. It's not that they're children, it's that they have to come. They have to choose to come. Even as children, you have to choose to go get your knowledge. Become a disciple, become one of the 12, and then you can know the mysteries of the kingdom of God. And what I found interesting is that etymologically, the root of the origins of the word math, myth, and mysteries are the same root. Myth, math, mystery. So without math vision, you can't have myth vision, can you? And this is Gnostic information. So if you want to have Gnostic information, you need to know this knowledge. You see, because Gnosticism is not about knowing how to convert Muslims to atheists and Christians to atheism. It's about knowledge of the people who wrote these old scriptures and these books, which were Pythagorean mystery school authors with great educations and great mathematical skills. And I'm also seeing that it looks like somewhere in the Gospels, I'm seeing differences in some of them, and I'm going, wait, somebody changed some of the numbers between, Matthew and John and Luke, and I'm going, why? What's going on here? So I haven't figured everything out. I still have a lot to learn. I don't claim to be a scholar. Even, my book's written from a layman perspective. I claim nothing except to just be a person who isn't afraid to scrap everything, to pull down all the way to the very foundation, pull it all down and reform my thinking as often as necessary. I'm not trying to persuade anyone of anything. Knowledge is up to you. Even in Proverbs, it says knowledge is in the heart of man like a well. The wise man will draw it from him. So you have to go to the well, and you have to put your own bucket down in the well, and you go to the person that knows something and you pull it out and do your own study. See, question, can you explain a bit more about whatever trademarks you were referring to? Yeah, sure, why not? I guess talk about anything you want. Now this is a whole nother topic from what I'm talking about, Bible numbers today, but all my other videos, we talk about that a lot. And so Gorgeous Roddy Chrome, yesterday, a man named Hugh Squire and I made a video, and we've been making videos for the last few years, okay? You definitely want to see yesterday's video. It's probably the best one that we've ever made. He brought all of his information out in picture form and showed it. Now, Hugh Squire is related to the kings and queens of Europe through Albert Pike and through the Byrd family, Admiral Byrd. Okay, Admiral Byrd was murdered on the same year that he was taken and kidnapped and put into and raped in a basement by the families of 4 governors. He escaped. Okay, and the police were part of this. He's also an actual genius. Just like his uncle Buckminster Fuller, who created and invented the geodesic dome and had patents on cars and milk trucks and all. The whole Fuller family owned a huge amount of wealth and were very smart and inventive, just like he is. Okay, and anyway, so by the time he was 10, he was writing to Kennedy about reforming the Berne Convention, Berne convention in Congress. And Kennedy was writing him back. By the time he was 12, he had his FCC licenses. Okay, and by 13 or so, he had started a band and called it Bottom Line, which he trademarked officially long before that word existed in the dictionary. Okay, so here we're talking about what's 19. He's born in 53, so 63, 64, 65, so roughly 67, 68. He's got this band named Bottom Line. Bottom Line becomes very popular, okay, in Michigan and Chicago and Northern Ohio. He's on the radio at the time, and it ends up getting stolen from him, okay? His band gets stolen from him, and at the same time, they're selling out Bottom Line all around the world, okay? Part of who did that was Rand Paul's family, interestingly, and Paul was the guy in the band that was helping with that. And the guy who replaced him, that the band replaced Hugh with, his name was Westfall. And it was really interesting because the police run a worldwide mafia here. Just a couple months ago, we were in a wreck and my car needed some pretty extensive repairs. Well, the police had it sent to Westfall Towing. And Westfall refused to order my parts. And I kept asking, well, where are the parts? And, oh, well, they're on order, but they're going to. 2 months later, now I ordered the parts. They came in immediately like they should have, okay, after I got tired of waiting. The guy was just lying to me. Just this week, 2 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, I mailed my computer to Hugh because he can fix computers like a pro because he designed the assembly lines at Chrysler and Ford and some other places in Detroit. So he knows robotics and he knows electronics like nobody's business. And he used to run a computer business too and repair computers on the side and stuff like that. So I mailed my computer to him. He lives out on the West Coast today. He's not in Michigan anymore. And I bought the computer from him originally. Well, it got stolen. And because it had been his computer, you can take all the passwords off of a computer even though you've deleted them off there. So everything was deleted, but they still got his passwords, and they were trying to hack his bank account this week. And at the same time, they took off they started messing with his Facebook account, and they got his Facebook account that he's had for the last at least 12 years completely just taken away, just removed. It's unreal what they do to him. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. But those stolen trademarks and receipts from Bottom Line, his business receipts, these were in the Twin Towers and in Tower 7. And that's why on 9/11, George Bush literally said from the White House, he said, Hugh's structures have come tumbling down. And he caught himself because Hugh's huge structures came tumbling down today. And it's not a coincidence. They knew exactly what they were doing. They designed 9/11 because the lawsuit that Hugh had against the government would have literally been worth trillions of dollars because Bottom Line had been stolen and used by all the lawyers' bars across the country. The 28,000 contracts that he had with ASCAP, just one song. He just showed me just one song that he had with Stephen Sondheim, a contract with him, Send in the Clowns, that was in the Joker movie recently. He had a contract with that to use that. It's worth $88 million. That's just one song. He had 28,000 contracts like that. Not to mention the use of Bottom Line. They created Bottom Line Bar in New York, where most rock stars got their start and stuff. A lot of famous stars got that. So they stole all that from him. Hey, Northern Rising, how you doing, man? It's been a while. So yeah, hey, you're gonna want to back up, bud, because I've been talking about all that stuff we talk about all the time, or used to anyway. So anyway, they stole everything from him, and that's yeah, it's always like that too when I get on. I always miss somebody, you know. I always find it interesting, Northern Rising. You know, I try to introduce things like this. Yeah, it's Wayne, right? Yeah, I, I was having a brain fart. I couldn't remember if it was Wayne or Joey. But anyway, I try to introduce something like this, the numbers like the Lord Jesus Christ and how it equals 3168, and I just introduce it very nicely on the guy's channel because I saw Derek had kicked off. What's his name? Oh, now all of a sudden he kicked off that scholar that he didn't like, and oh yeah, definitely, gorgeous. Yesterday's video is the best one we've made yet, because all the evidence and all the, you know, his businesses, licenses, and all this stuff's right there in front of you. There's no denying it. Yeah, thank you, gorgeous. Bob Price, yeah, and oh yeah, gorgeous. Yeah, this is why they messed up the book when they sent it to you, because chapter 11 talks about Hugh Squire, and that's why they did that to him. They stole my computer. They hacked his bank accounts all in the same week. You know, they sent my car. The police sent my car to the people that replaced his band. I mean, and they refused to fix it for 2 months. You know, this stuff's been going on a lot. It's unbelievable. So the government has their friends that run things, you know, smart people that run things, and they're in Amazon, they're in Facebook, they work at Facebook. And I don't mean it's all one giant conspiracy per se, but they do have their friends and their families and people that, you know, appreciate and do what they want. And that's apparently one of them's at Amazon screwing up my book now because I have Hugh as chapter 11. If I hadn't had Hugh in there, and I do definitely want him in there, but that's then they would have never screwed it up like that, gorgeous. So yeah, so Dr. Bob Price. So anyway, Lambert kicked off Dr. Price, and there was this Catholic guy supporting Bob Price. I said, okay, well, he sounds like a cool guy, because I think it's a pretty lousy thing to just throw your friends under the bus for money, like Lambert did to Price. So I thought, all right, this Catholic guy, I'm going to just go see what he's about. Well, I could tell he wasn't like the smartest guy or whatever, but I didn't want to. So I started off talking to him about Catholic-y kind of things, you know, like where does, you know, do you think Peter's really buried under the Vatican stuff? You know, things I would think that typical Catholics would appreciate as a conversation piece, you know, trying to be friendly, because I'm thinking, hey, this guy supported Bob Price. I like Bob Price. I like Bob Price's conservatism. You know, I'm not a flaming liberal because I left fundamentalism and even don't really believe the, you know, the church going doctrines anymore of the Baptist Church or anything. Even though that I'm still, you know, strongly conservative. I don't understand these people that as soon as they leave, they go 180 degrees in the opposite direction. They say, oh, because something over here was wrong with the people that believe in Christianity. Well, they happen to be conservatives too. So that means every last thing that a Christian conservative believes is wrong. Therefore, everything that everybody else believes must be right. but a lot of people, they're black or white thinkers. And I've tried very hard to get through black and white fundamentalist style thinking where everything's black or white. Yeah, thank you, Wayne. And but as soon as I mentioned Lord Jesus Christ to this Catholic guy, you know, and how his name is 3168, instantly started making fun of me and just laughing, and even Lambert and Apostate Prophet were doing that a little bit ago, you know, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what the, you know, rather than laugh about something you don't have any understanding about, I mean, at least educate yourself first before, because you don't understand, you know, like Abraham Lincoln said, it's better, I suppose it's really Abraham Lincoln that said this, if this is true, you know, it's better to be thought an idiot and stay quiet and open your mouth and remove all doubt. And they don't understand that they're seriously missing a lot of information. I don't mean they're stupid overall, but concerning this topic, they're very ignorant, very stupid. And so if they knew what they didn't know, they wouldn't laugh and things. Yeah, Canadian Catholic. Thank you. That was his name. Yeah, Joshua. So I think I'm going to refer to him no longer as Canadian Catholic, but as a-hole guy now from now on. So I immediately gave him a thumbs down and unsubscribed. I mean, I was trying to be nice to the guy and give him a conversation piece of something that I thought maybe he'd be interested in. But you just can't the Masons, no, you can't evangelize, and that's why. Just set your temple up on a hill, and if people want to know it, they'll draw the knowledge from you. They'll ask questions, and they'll come learn themselves, and that's probably the best you're going to get. Now, Rebecca, are you still on there? Because I would love to know how you get people to call in. You had some link thing and all that where people could click it and call in. And I thought that was very interesting, but I don't have a clue how to do that. So if you ever want to teach me how you do that someday, I would greatly appreciate that, because I'll take callers someday or something and we'll talk about some of this stuff. Took me a long time to learn not to be extremely caustic, and I'm still caustic with my family, and I'm trying very hard not to. I got girls, and girls you got to try to be real nice to. But I was a fundamentalist a long time, and very black and white thinker for a long time. It's very difficult, and before that, I'm also an introvert. I have Asperger's, so I'm already a black and white thinker by nature. So good, bad, right, or wrong. It's hard to calm down and be nice to people, and I'm working really hard on trying to change that. I was much much worse. I've come a long ways. Hopefully, I'm not too big of an a-hole to the people I talk to. I'm going to try my best to just say what I think is true, and hopefully not insult people too much that don't listen. um, because I understand that real depth, real knowledge, just like Hugh's information, it feels so big to people. They come into the Hughes story and they say there's no way that the guy who was arrested for Jimmy Hoffa's murder was also talking to Kennedy as a 10-year-old boy, you know, and then the theft of his trademarks led to 9/11. Well, that's why. They're all very related. He lived in Michigan and joined the Teamsters, and his mother-in-law was with Jimmy Hoffa the night that she disappeared, and they tried to set up Hugh for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. And he was the first one detained for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. Well, why was the FBI trying to do this? Well, because he was raped by the governors who shot Kennedy, and it wasn't Oswald. Okay, and we have a great deal of proof of that. Okay, so Mac Osborne was with Oswald, and Osborne was the guy that raped him. So Osborne, and then you say, oh, Mike Osborne's running the sex crimes division in the FBI today. And you're like, wow, these families have been at this for a long time. Families like Long and Wallace and Long, Wallace, Anderson, Andrews. These are families of governors and media personalities that you see still to this day. Daryl Hall that you see on TV from Hall and Oates. He was a 12 or 13-year-old boy, and he was getting himself off in the basement watching little boys being raped. I mean, terrible, terrible people. And Hugh escaped, but some of the others were murdered, and Hugh's twin was murdered. And then they created a story, which I have. I bought the book. It's called The Boy in the Box. You can find it on Amazon or YouTube. And it's really interesting because the person that wrote it, I think, knew exactly what was going on, because he addresses it to Mr. H, or Hugh, but he never tells you who Mr. H is. That's Hugh Squire. But these stories are true, and I understand that people can't wrap their heads around it, but I also understand. Well, his mom and he were used to be invited by the Queen to go to White Gloves dinner when she would come to America. He's related to famous families all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and Albert Pike and Admiral Byrd, who was It was murdered the day that, yeah, we live in a real sick world. That's exactly right. A lot of pedophiles in your government. No, it's not the Freemasons doing it. There may be some Freemasons doing it also, but it's not Freemasonry as an institution or the evil Illuminati or anything like that. It's we name real names like Osborne and Wallace and Long and people who are really involved in this. Um, and there's just so much to Hugh's story. And I trace it back to the 1800s, Edgar Allan Poe's literary critics. We're tracing it back to witches in this country and the people that married him and got into his life to try to steal computer information for Cook and Apple computers, because Bill Gates was there at his wedding, and Joe Jacob gave Bill Gates the information to make his first computers, right there at his wedding. So this is a famous family, and this is a guy who happens to be a genius in a famous family. To give you an example, and just like his uncle Buckminster Fuller was a genius, and he invented the geodesic dome, that big ball that you see at Disney World at Epcot Center, that looks like a giant golf ball. That's called a geodesic dome, and that concept was invented by Buckminster Fuller. And he and Buckminster Fuller and Disney were the model that Avengers Tony Stark was based on. Okay, Disney is sort of a combination between Disney and Buckminster Fuller. Well, Hugh's like that. He's a genius. He can. If you ever seen that gematria calculator, which no, I don't use the modern gematria. When I talk about gematria, I only use um, the ancient Greek gematria and the septenary that's used in the King James Bible. But uh, he can take an entire sentence, find another sentence in his head immediately, like within seconds, and completely put that in another cipher according to that with the same value. It's unreal. This guy is such a genius. It's like there's nobody like that. He says he can't go to Vegas because he'll memorize everybody's cards instantly, and he always wins. So yeah, it's interesting. Gorgeous. This is when I was first studying, and fundamentalism and the Bible was, I was starting to see that there were problems. So I was really trying to reach out and study things. And excuse me, one of the first places I went was the Hubbard's Gematria page there. And I was making videos. I'm sorry, I was making videos with Quinn, and Quinn was out of Detroit, even though he says he's from somewhere else, and right there where Hugh's from in Detroit. And they were telling me not to listen to Hugh, and so did Hubbard. Hubbard was telling me don't listen to Hugh. It's amazing that the person that introduced me, um, Hubbard and Quinn, that's all his enemies. It's unbelievable. Those families are some of his enemies, and that's why. Well, the person that introduced me met me on there, and her name was Ward. And then I look in the Ward and I say, oh, this is Montgomery Ward, the people that sued Hugh and sent an entire team of lawyers, a big team of lawyers to sue him, to bankrupt him and try to keep him. Remember, they murdered his attorneys while they're on their way to file charges for murders. They for like a $30 debt, they sent a team. Montgomery Ward sent a team of lawyers to sue him, a big team. It's unbelievable the things they've done to him over his life. Um, and this is the Ward family. So I was introduced to Hugh through the Ward family, and then I look and I go, oh, Ward is also the first. So I know this is related to the Navy personnel and the people that do military codes and stuff like that. It's operated by the Navy because the Navy runs the Secret Service. And then you see, you see things like the Office of Ciphers and Codes in Great Britain. It's the same thing. We have that in this country too. Um, and you find out that the Ward ship was the first American ship that was destroyed in World War II by the Japanese. Oh, well, that's interesting. The USS Ward. And okay, and this is Batman and Robin's family. Batman the greatest detective, and he's got Robin as a sidekick. That's the Ward family. Um, and no doubt that's related too in amazing ways. Um, because there's more to the Batman story. I mean, Hugh's story is so far on and on. When he was a kid, he knew the origin of the Batman story because he knew about Wayne State there in Wayne County, Michigan, And Wayne State College, there was a professor named Lee Chin who was beat up with a bat as publicity to create the Batman story. Because what a lot of people don't know and understand in this country is that movies and books are publicized through murders. Because the way to get free advertising is to go out and kill people, and then the news runs your advertising for you, free advertising. People look in, oh, what's that about? Or they hear about, oh, okay, and then it resonates subconsciously in their mind. So they kill people, and they kill. Sometimes they do it by codes. They killed Hugh's former wives and the fiancés of these fiancés and wives by on his birthdays, because they were doing it by a code to make sure that he understood that these were, government servants working in behalf of the government. So it's not a coincidence they killed them killed them all on holidays. One of them was actually not on the holiday; it was on October 30th, the day before Halloween. So the news would be out the next day on Halloween. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a brand new computer, Zenith. I am using a fairly cheap set of headphones, though. I don't know what else to do. I thought I had good reception here. I don't know if anybody else is getting that crackling or what. No one else has mentioned it so far. That's sad. I've been talking for an hour. I hope it hasn't been crackling for an hour. So I apologize for that, but I don't see anything that I can do about it. You know what I didn't think of is I forgot to take my VPN off. That could be why. So I guess I am running it through a VPN. So this is going to somewhere in Europe first, I think. Okay, well, fair enough. But if I turn it off now, it'll just probably turn off the show. So yeah, Zenith says some interesting things. Lot to do with chemicals and the elements and things. Yeah, a lot of interesting things there. I tune in from time to time. I don't always say anything, Zenith, but I'm there from time to time. A loose cable end. Yeah, well, you know what? I have a pair of headphones. I'll start bringing them with me when I'm here, and maybe I'll use those next time and see if it works better. I appreciate the clues there that something's wrong. So I'll go get a nicer. I do have a nice set at home, so I'll start using those and see if it changes anything next time. But I'm not at home at the moment. So anyway, I lost focus on what I was talking about. So I was talking about Ward, the Ward family, and how murders are publicity for movies and books and that sort of thing. And this happens every day in America. A lot of the murders that you see are news stories are to advertise. Um, and then you see other things that are code in Hugh's life. Like I'm watching American Idol, and I see that two of the characters that quit American Idol, one was named Pike, Hugh's ancestor Albert Pike, and the other was Kennedy Anderson. Oh, Kennedy and Anderson was one of the people that raped Hugh in Osborne's basement. And both of them quit for quote unquote personal reasons. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. But I'm guessing that whoever knows their personal reasons looked into it and threw it in their face. And both of those people had to quit, probably to send a message, a coded message. Now, do the singers know that? No. Do the actors know that? No. I had to call just a few weeks ago. I called actor Alec Baldwin's attorneys. And I only talked to the secretary, and they won't call back. And that's because in Hugh's life, his sister married Baldwin, not Alec Baldwin, the actor, but a relative of his. And I don't know how distant. I don't know if they're third cousins or even more distant than that. I don't know. I just know they're related somewhere along the line. And the guy who killed his sister's husband, Brian Baldwin, he called himself Brian Hawthorne, and he would call Hugh on the telephone and tell him that he was going to kill Baldwin. Why Baldwin, and what his purpose was in doing this, I don't know. But he went through with it. He went and killed his sister's husband, and he tried to tell his sister that Brian's been calling me. This guy named Brian Baldwin been calling me on the phone saying he's going to kill your husband, and she wouldn't believe him. I don't know why, but anyway, Brian Baldwin said, now this was in Michigan. He says, now I'm coming after you. So he drives all the way from where flies or however he got there from Michigan to out west. I'm not going to say where Hugh lives, but he lives out west, West Coast, and he shows up and instead of killing him, because Hugh's always loaded, he'll shoot you right in the face if you try to break in, and you're up to no good. And he has to live that way, unfortunately, because they're doing the same thing to him that they did to John DeLorean when they hold him, and they took everything from him and hold him up in a little place, stole everything that he owned. And anyway, so he goes out west and he kills a cat, and he smears the blood all over the place he lives, and throws the carcass at his door. Okay, and then calls and brags about it, and he says, "Now my name's Rusty Killin." Rusty Killin. What the heck's that mean? Rusty Killin. And I knew all this story, okay? I've known this for the last couple years. I've known this story because Hughes told me this story multiple times. Then we're watching the news, and we find that Halls, like Daryl Hall raped Hugh in Osborne's basement, we find Halls hands Alec Baldwin, the actor, a loaded gun, which ends up killing the director, Helena Hutchins, HH, like Hugh has H and H in it, right? So Halls handed him the gun. Is Halls Rusty Killin / Brian Baldwin? I don't know. Or Brian Hawthorne, rather. He called himself Brian Hawthorne because he killed Brian Baldwin. It sounds like it probably is. Well, if you're defending Alec Baldwin and you're his attorney and you want to really protect him, would you not want your client to know that there's a madman out killing Baldwins that are related to you? You'd think, right? But I'll tell you, this is Hugh's story. You call the news and you call anybody to try to tell the story, they don't call back. Call the FBI, they hang up on you. Hugh calls the FBI. They hang up on him every time because the government knows exactly who he is, and they will not take his story. The news won't take his story. When two of his wives were murdered, they wouldn't even give him so much as an obituary in the local paper. That's how much they've controlled his life, because he knows the exact people who killed Kennedy, and his trademarks and everything that they stole from him, and his multi-trillion-dollar lawsuit led to 9/11. So it's unreal. This is a rabbit hole like nothing else on the face of the earth. I mean, nothing else exists like this. Hugh has a photographic memory. He tells the story exactly the same way every single time he says it. He remembers every conversation we have, which is kind of annoying sometimes because he remembers everything I said, and I don't. I can barely remember what I did yesterday, but he remembers every word of everything you say. And so, no, you said this on this day. I'm like, oh, did I? Daggone it. So, he's just. And then he offers you all the proof. Yesterday's video is the best one that we've ever had. So, well, it's been a long time, hour and a half. Anybody else have any more questions? I'll give you a minute if there's anything else anybody wants to say, or it can be, I don't care if you want to ask about Hugh or if you want to talk about numbers in the Bible or anything. There's probably some other things I missed. I apologize for the crackling headphone now that I know about it. Next time I won't do that. I remember getting this from somebody else's work here, but Kurios Jesus Christos, Lord Jesus Christ in Greek, which I told you equals 3168. The divisors of 3168 sum to 6,660. Oh, you bet, gorgeous. I appreciate it. And isn't it interesting that the tilt of the Earth, the axis of the Earth, sits at 66.6 degrees and goes 66,000 miles around the sun? 66,600 miles around the sun. There's 66 books in the Bible. Isn't that interesting? Some other numbers in the Bible. There's 39 books in the Old Testament. Read it backwards. It's 93 million miles to the sun, right? And isn't the Old Testament prophesying the coming of the Son of Righteousness, as it says in Malachi 4:2? capital S-U-N, the Son of Righteousness shall come with healing in his wings. And then all 39 books, like there's 93 million miles to the sun. Somehow they knew that, and don't ask me how. And then you have 27 books in the New Testament, and you go, oh, Jesus equals 27 in English gematria, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and look at it. Then it comes together and it's 66, like 666. And in the 66 books of the Bible is where it mentions the 666, right? Which, interestingly, if you read that in Greek backwards, it's sigma, epsilon, x, xi, right? Is that how you say that? Only backwards. That's actually it's digamma, epsilon, xi. Sigma, it's digamma, epsilon, sigma. Yeah, but if you look at it backwards, it looks like 6, okay? In Greek, you know that number 603 score and 6? Well, if you grab your Greek New Testament, it's just 3 letters. If you read it backwards, it looks just like the English word sex. And then you have words like hex and 6, and you know they're all related. So sex, 6, and hex, those are all related terms. You know, it's interesting studying these numbers. It leads to all sorts of etymologies too. So, all right, well, I guess I'll stop it here, and glad y'all stopped in, listen to me.